Comics can be a way to tell many different kinds of stories. Some are very personal, even if they also contain fantastical elements. Pidge's Infinite Wheatpaste series fits into this category. Avery Hill has just published a collection of this Ignatz Award-nominated series, and this week Pidge talks to Emmet about her attraction to the comics medium, how it often doesn't cover all the aspects of life that it could, and how a supervillain on your couch isn't funny, it's scary. As always, a reminder that you can support the podcast by pledging a few bucks a month at patreon.com/deconcomics. Or if you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support. This is Tim, and this is Deconstructing Comics.
Hello and welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Emmet in Country, Victoria, and I'm on the line with Pidge in Country, Colorado. We're both in isolated regions of the world, I hear.
Yes, the bridge went out, so it's more isolated than usual.
Oh goodness, okay. Yes, I can't claim the same. We're still accessible here where I am, but are you guys okay?
Oh yeah, it was funny. I'm a teacher, so a few weeks ago, the bridge had a huge crack, and fortunately, our school bus that went over it, that made all of everyone here really nervous, got through safely, and it didn't collapse, but they shut it down promptly, and so we had students for the first couple of days coming in by ferry. Yeah, so that was interesting, and just the power of public education. The bridge went out on a Friday, and by Monday we had a ferry and volunteers getting students who were stuck on the other side of the bridge to classes. So it feels more rural than usual at the moment. We're definitely remote where I am.
Yeah, making do. Yeah. Okay. Well, well done on getting the kids into the schools and coming together a community, all that. There isn't a natural segue there, but I think there is an interesting point of comparison in terms of Infinite Wheatpaste and your story. And before we started recording, you mentioned that it's quite a personal framing of a story, and I kind of just wanted to get stuck in because so one thing I've been really enjoying lately is stories which have an element of ordinariness, but are still fantastical. So when I started reading Infinite Wheatpaste and I was being introduced to Norse gods who are riding on bicycles and space aliens who are just hanging out and chatting with a Neanderthal man and all these random elements sort of percolating within this very everyday reality, waiting at bus stops, going to coffee shops. I got very excited because this suddenly was on theme with a lot of things I've been enjoying lately. So I just wondered, maybe that's a point of departure for us. Why the framing of your stories in this way? Why this sort of combination of the fantastical and the ordinary?
Well, there's a great quote. I'm not sure to whom I should attribute it, but art is an effort to create, beside the real world, a more human world. So even doing all of those things, it's in an effort to share, I think, a more human experience. And I think you can do that with realism, but I think I show you the texture of the feeling better. If those things are in there, they emphasize it to me. I want to visually show you connection. And I guess this medium is just so special to be able to do that. Why not do it?
Yeah, and the book itself just launches with you introducing yourself as a character within the book, and then your partner also within the book. And so there's a sort of blurring of that line instantly. You open the book and you're in, okay, I'm the creator of this comic, but also I'm in this comic. Here's me. Here's my avatar. and occasionally you appear in the book too. And that's sort of I just like that idea of lifting out the story so that it's not a sort of product. It's like, no, this is an experience. I'm experiencing making it. You're experiencing reading it. We're meeting here in the middle somewhere. The lines are blurry. That's
very
really
kind. Thank you.
No. I thought that struck me as being your project. That seemed to be what you were doing. And I was very interested in that because I think that sort of lends itself to more creative inspiration. Because then you have an emotional investment in the characters. They feel closer to you as a creator, and then me as a reader, because I'm like, oh well, Pidge is in here too. This is. I've been. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Karen?
Oh, I was going to say, I hope parts of people I love are throughout the comics. So hopefully when someone reads it, they feel like they're authentically connecting to these people, and some of them aren't people, but they're authentically connecting to them in some way because I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's something I can see as I apologize. I have a cat on me now. I mean, okay, this is an interesting point as well. Podcasting itself as a medium that we all are engaging with on this everyday way, and with that comes a lot of parasocial interaction, which is very unusual development, I found, but people are now forming these communities based around certain podcasts, and they're interesting people. And you have, once again, that blurring of the line, because it used to be that a broadcast or a publication or a book even was coming from a place of authority. And now it's like, well, everyone with a computer and a microphone can just get in and pick a niche topic and just go. And that's, again, one of those reasons why I enjoyed your book, because I felt it was also very porous, sort of blending all these different genres and all these different sources. And I keep coming back to this idea of just this everyday life of these characters and these little vignettes that the book is broken into. So was this something that you just were naturally arrived at as an approach, or were you setting out to do something in a particular way?
Well, I think we can only come from ourselves, not to be navel gazing in any way. It's just, there's so many people, like, especially when I was starting this comic, like, oh, I really love the way Jeff Lemire writes. Well, I don't write like him. And just realizing that we are so, from our own standpoint, we can only be ourselves. I thought there were so many people that would sort of echo into what this is, but it just seems so different from anything else I've ever read. It's unique to me. So I don't know if I had a particular outset. It's every fun tangent. I keep a notebook and I write absurdities down, but eventually they turn into something.
Yeah, I have a note here, which is the horse bus driver doesn't have opposable thumbs to change a tire. I don't know. That was just a nice little detail. It made me laugh.
Yeah. And, there are definitely cultural influences there. I think it's Jiro Matsumoto, I want to say. He did some incredible, pretty psychedelic comics or manga. And I always loved his, horse taxi driver. So I think anything that I just enjoy finds its way in. And I'm glad that my tastes are so esoteric and so broad that maybe people don't really realize where those things come from.
Oh, I was playing whack-a-mole with looking for sources of inspiration. I thought I spotted Doug the koala from Ugly Americans. I got very excited about that. There was a character from the bathhouse and was it Spirited Away that we see at one point?
Yes. The
Yes.
rabbit spirit.
And yeah, I did want to ask you about manga because I felt manga is quite opposite in terms of some of the books I've been enjoying recently, like Doro Hedoro, Kia Hayashida's book, which is just, again, a range of influences like in a blender on the page. And as a reader, I find it very exciting because it's like, oh, she's not limiting herself to one particular genre or even one particular style of storytelling. It's just all, it's very punk. It's just all happening at once. So I felt you're sort of in the same tradition, if you like, or maybe the same neighborhood.
You know, I'm old enough to remember the bubble bursting of comics on the stand at your grocery store. And there are so many like I remember the Image revolution and like how exciting all of those things were that they were happening, but they weren't really as much the stories that I was interested in reading, but the idea that artists could take that power and understanding that that moment was happening. And then all those variant covers showed up and it burst. And then it was out of grocery stores and it was kind of out of like, culture, broader culture, and became this niche thing. And I think I loved comics, and my whole life, it's all I ever wanted to be a part of. And I didn't think anybody was making anything that I wanted to see. And I just didn't find it yet because the distribution changed so much. And you're just a rural kid trying to get a hold of what comics you can, and suddenly they're gone. You're in a comics desert. And I think manga really brought me back in a big way. And I don't mean the big manga. And then that really opened me to all the exciting things that were happening in the independent scene. And wow, like there are these rich stories people were telling before the bubble burst that I couldn't get a hold of and are contemporarily telling. And so in a big way, manga really, I never walked away from comics. I felt like comics had moved away from me for a long time because I just didn't have the access to find the stuff that I would enjoy. If that makes sense. So,
yeah, you call out particular comic texts within Infinite Wheatpaste as like points of reference as well. You talk about your love of comics in the sort of introductory biographical note, and X-Men is prominently featured, and X-Men gets mentioned directly by characters as well. And that got me thinking about Stan Lee's whole maxim of, Marvel is the world you see outside your window. And if I was to send somebody into a store today and say, hey, pick a Marvel comic, and they come back to me with, I don't know, Blood Hunt #1, which at the time of recording is now on sale. That's not the world outside your window. That's an incredibly bizarre vampire epic with lots of horror elements and gross violence. So that Stan Lee idea, I think, has fallen by the wayside. That idea of, again, that what's outside your window, what's happening in the world, let's give a sense of the present. And you had captured that just through that idea of these lives intersecting with these extraordinary things. I feel like I'm a broken record because I keep coming back to this, but it seems to be the underlying reality of the comic. Just what if all these extraordinary storytelling elements were happening in an ordinary world, which is beautifully done. Stan Lee said that. I always felt Jack Kirby did it. He was just there, and for years, Tim is the host of Deconstructed Comics, and he's had me on reading some Jack Kirby books with him. And it's been a revelation for me, just meeting some of these characters for the first time. I was always familiar with the image of Darkseid sitting on a couch as a funny meme. And then I
Yeah.
read the book and I was like, oh, this isn't ridiculous. This isn't silly. This is actually very scary that evil is sitting on your couch, you know?
Oh, my spouse will be upset with me if I get the details wrong, but he's at Coney Island or something, and like children are having ice cream, and
Yes.
he's giving his monologue. His sinister overtones are there, and that's lovely.
Yeah.
I like the extraordinary existing parallel to the ordinary.
Mm.
We live so much that's ordinary that I don't think people stop to think how having coffee with your friend is worth putting in a comic, and how right, I have how much in a bus, public transport, that time in between activities, who you spend it with is important.
Yeah.
And how we meet each other is important. And those happen in ordinary circumstances. And I think Infinite Wheatpaste is an attempt to make it feel a little more special with these other things. You have an apartment complex in the background, and you can see that there are yokai back there, but it's just friends talking about their classes in the foreground. Like, that's actually interesting. And I think all those other things are there to kind of pull you in and let you know that some big things can happen here. And they do. I definitely have bigger stories and things that can be bombastic in there. There are definitely great fight sequences that, I enjoyed, but a lot of life is that. And I like to take a moment to appreciate it.
Yeah, you lead off one of the first issues, which is you have a cosmic battle between a superhuman type and these giant kaiju type slug creatures or sandworms. And it ends on a very tragic note, and it's really interesting, and it sort of keeps echoing through the comic. Other characters keep talking about that event and the impact it had. Um, you mentioned something bad happened to Perth, which, having been to Perth, what worse could happen to Perth? But it sort of comes across as being both very exciting and thrilling, but also very sad. And you are connecting this idea of this character's immense power with addiction and loss of control. And that made it very interesting, just as a point of inquiry.
Yeah, well, some of them are stories that I just wrote in a notebook and went, oh, I feel like, there's a parallel here, or with something else that connects to me personally, so I can tell it in an authentic way. And it could be very out there. But some of those are really stories I had to tell. I think I was, dealing with, I haven't mentioned this in any interviews, but I have a very close friend who that character is really based on. And when I started the comic, I was still dealing with kind of what his addiction did to our relationship and the worry that I carried. And he, I carried this much bigger person than me because he was that frail, out of a building and got him to get medically cleared for detox. And so that, I think those notes are there. That's real. And I guess I'm just not the type to go, and I don't like to talk about those feelings. I'd rather explore them, I guess.
You make something with them.
Yeah. And so I was relieved that, he was ready to get better. And, I was his best man, and we joke, and I'm the godfather of his child. So, there were good things that happened there, but I think there's a part in my brain that still plays out the what if, and is I think the psychological damage is actually just dealing with what if I lost that person in my life, and in a lot of ways the whole story, there are other people in there who mean something to me, but I think the whole thing really started there. And I wanted to tell a story about someone who was hurt and gone, and I wanted this character to be out of the picture, and I wanted to show how meaningful and important they were even in their absence. I think it's a lot of the comic, not all of it, is about explaining what a whole someone in your life can be. And I think I needed to process that part of it. So
Yeah, no, it's his absence is a storytelling device that I think is quite interesting. Because then people keep mentioning him, and then through mentioning him, we understand their relationships more, and we become more invested in them because we went through this experience with this character at the start. It's very well done. It's beautifully done. But also your approach to the illustration, where characters respond emotionally in such a way that reality warps around them. A person is about to have a traumatic event. That event echoes down through time, keeps happening to them before it happens, which is a lovely touch. Is very David Lynch. I thought at a certain point, I was like, oh, I'm familiar with some of this. But that scene where how would I pronounce it? So or Sue?
yeah,
So has that emotional moment, and she becomes oversized. Like her vulnerability is so great that she becomes giant sized in that moment. And one of my favorite comics the last 10 years is Tilly Walton's. I love that part. I love this part. I think the two girls talking about music, and they become giant sized in their intimacy. When they're talking together, they are the size of mountains, and there are small towns dwarfed beneath them. And I thought you hit on the same image, and it was just beautifully done. As I said, that really is compelling to me, because you're letting the art tell the emotional story.
yeah, if you get too scared to do those kinds of things, then you really restrict what you can show. And I think, don't we process things that way anyway? Like, does it really break away from the narrative if, something happening to you doesn't taint every memory before and after? Don't you feel like you're like stuck inside your big dumb body, staring at your shoes that seem too far away when you get your heart broken? Like you're just detached. And I think that's where I was going with that one, right? Like everything is just in the way of our conversation, and you're not really coming out and having it. Like that's that feeling, I think.
Yeah, no, it's I always think of how let's return to, oh no, X-Men, we've mentioned X-Men, but also another sort of, I love this use of comic books in your work as like almost magical texts, important objects. And of course, the Sandman, the beating of our wings, appears at one point. And again, that's another book which I think a lot of us of a certain age sort of glommed onto. This is something new. This is something different. This is telling a story in an interesting way. And I remember seeing the response, because I grew up in Dublin, Ireland. And so Neil Gaiman coming to Dublin was an event within a certain set of intense young person. So I remember seeing the queue of people all decked out in their goth finery, waiting to meet Neil Gaiman, and I just had this impression of, oh, something's happening here. This is new. This is a new kind of fandom. They're excited about him, and one of the reasons why is because again he was telling these very emotional stories. Um, we can discuss whether or not we like Neil Gaiman and like his writing or whatever.
Well,
But
I've
he
waited many hours to see him, so we don't need to worry about that one.
okay, but he tapped into something that
Yeah.
was maybe left wanting at the time.
Well, a lot of I do quote him a lot, or misquote him maybe, but fiction is a way to tell the truth. And that's, I think, his ethos in a big way. And I think that's central to what I care about as far as making a comic. Like through fiction, you are telling truths. And I think sometimes through something that is nonfiction, we tell a narrative, right? We tell a perspective of power. We tell the way that we want to lionize ourselves or a group or a faction, but you can't hide behind fiction. If you're doing it right, it is your heart on your sleeve. It's in your face.
I was, again, as I mentioned at the start, I was excited to talk to you about this comic because when I started reading it, I thought, well, this is going to be funny because the podcast is called Deconstructing Comics. And deconstruction, as I understand it, is trying to talk about a thing while not letting yourself get in the way of talking about that thing. Like all the preconditioned ideas that you have, all the sort of concepts that you are bringing to the text outside of the text, try and identify those and get them out of the way so you can actually talk about the text. That's I'm trying to boil down a lot of theory into a statement there. And I was laughing because a lot of what we do in Deconstructing Comics, well, at least certainly when I'm involved, is we just talk about the comic. We just review the comic book. So you could almost call the podcast Talking Comics because that's what we're doing. But your work rewards the process of deconstructing, rewards the idea of, well, where's all this coming from? Let's identify all these elements. Let's try and that's part of the fun. As I said to you, I jokingly called it, I was playing whack-a-mole, but I think I actually enjoyed that process of discovery as I was reading it. I was tracking your sources of inspiration as best as I could as a stranger. But you were sort of highlighting to me, saying, well, this is here, and this is here, and this is here. I'm with you. Okay, let's go. So those sort of fictional breadcrumbs give you a map to understand what this story is about. And his references actually enrich the text. So, you've done something really interesting here. And
Thank you.
yeah, no. I think I've just enjoyed reading it, but also it made me think about comic books as a sort of mongrel art form where you can just mix and match all these elements and it works. You can do that. There's nothing stopping you.
I like to think of it as punk, right? Like everybody who wants to move to that graphic novel, and I get where that term came from, and I like his work, but I like that I make comics, and punk was a put down, and I like taking it up and saying, no, I make comics, and I still like the single issue, and this collection was really thoughtful in putting together where to stop as far as an arc. But I like every part of it. And I don't, maybe mutt is a better word because it's everything can exist. There's so few barriers to entry in comics that you get so many voices, and I just love them all, even if it's not the best drawn comic or it's not my cup of tea. If they showed me that they had enough care to put those juxtaposed images in a thoughtful way, and they cared enough about the craft to do a good job of the lettering, I'll admit I'm a lettering snob, then I'm with you. I want to just digest it all. I reach back to Hergé. I reach to something I just see and love. And the stories themselves, I think the emotional threads are really universal and really welcoming. And I don't think they're that hard to follow. I think there were some potential pitfalls as far as, how do you represent space and time collapsing, but still running the thread of a story through it. And I think I managed it with some clarity. And it's that all of those things that are extra are just to invite you into a bigger world of comics. I think it's for everybody, but I think it's especially for people who love comics. So
I love that. That's nice. Well, Mr. Zoom is about to kick me off, I think. But is there anything else you'd like to add? I mean, I didn't say at the start, but I should have. Congratulations on the successful Kickstarter, and Infinite Wheatpaste developed from Avery Hill. So wonderful publisher, and well done on getting that over the line.
Well, thank you. It's 280 pages in color. It was a big process. It's available now, and you can get it through Avery Hill or wherever you pick up your comics. And they were a fantastic team, and I don't want to go forward without mentioning, my spouse did the colors and did such a fantastic job.
And as we mentioned, is a character in the book too.
And being a comic person, he was very reluctant to be in the comic because it's my thing. And so I convinced him if I had him on as Baghead, Charlie Brown's alter ego, would he do it? And so even just that is, a comics reference. And he said, okay, I would be on there as Baghead. So he did a great job. The team with Avery Hill, they were just amazing. And I really think that if you are missing a comic that if you want a comic that's not one note but more of a symphony and has all these things coming together, I think this is for you. There's so many comics right now. What was the Blood Hunters?
Blood #1, for example.
I mean, I can't imagine there's a lot of depth. If you can catch it in the first bit, I don't know if that comic is for me necessarily. I like comics that can be many different things. I'm kind of more of a Claremont X-Men person, and I hate baseball, but my God, the baseball ones are my absolute favorites because it's just people hanging out and being strange. And if you want to hang out in a fun, strange place, I think Infinite Wheatpaste is definitely for you. I am just tickled pink, though, to be on Deconstructing Comics. You were the top of my list.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You always get some of the most interesting and odd guests, and some of them I have a hard, or at least years ago, I would have a hard time finding primary sources on them and their work. If you guys can go back, I think one of my favorite Deconstructing Comics episodes is your interview of Dylan Horrocks, where you guys talk about maps. Oh my gosh, that is a good time. So go back in the catalog too.
I love that interview. That's an interview I share with people a lot. And that interview got rescheduled. I'll give you some backstory. That just got rescheduled 2 or 3 times because his D&D campaign kept interfering with the scheduled times. So, and I was like, oh, D&D. And then since then, COVID happened, and now unfortunately, that's my entire personality now. Now I'm just playing all these D&D. And I like to think that Dylan Horrocks set me on that path because I was really curious. Why is he into this so much? What's so appealing with this game?
Now I want to see what maps he made for his D&D campaign.
Exactly, right? You can only imagine.
I love Hicksville. It lives in my brain. I often think of it, and I like comics that are kind of a made-up place where your mind can go, and that's one of my favorite examples of it. And I really love the extra stuff you guys got into in there. Hopefully, we dug in a little bit more today. I thank you so much for your time.
Of course. Pidge, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much. And there's a lovely button you put on your own work there. I left it to you. You did a great job. Right. All the best.
Thank you so much.
I crave superheroic content. Let's see what's on.
I want you to tell all your friends about me.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Nah, I don't think so.
I'm Batman.
Not really what I'm looking for.
I am vengeance. I am the night. I am Batman.
Ugh, absolutely not.
This is Robin the Boy Wonder. I'm Batman.
Aha, now that's more like it.
If you see Adam West as the one true Batman, then this is the podcast for you. Tune in every other Thursday on your favorite podcast source to hear Tim and Paul discuss the 1966 series and everything connected with it. What's the podcast called?
To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles. To the Batpoles.
Infinite Wheatpaste Volume 1, Catalytic Conversions, is published by Avery Hill. Thanks to our patrons for supporting Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts. To join them, go to patreon.com/deconcomics. Every 4 weeks, we drop another episode of Starlin Kills Captain Marvel, discussing all of Jim Starlin's Captain Marvel work. It's available to patrons contributing at least $4 a month. That's less than you'd spend on a trip to Starbucks. How about cutting back on your caffeine intake and instead hear some stimulating conversations about Captain Marvel and Thanos? That's patreon.com/deconcomics. At deconstructingcomics.com, you can connect to us on X, Facebook, or YouTube. Follow the link to shop at Amazon to support the show, and find links to subscribe to the podcast. You can comment on any episode on our site, or drop us a line at mail@deconstructingcomics.com. And now you can also send us a voicemail. Find the Leave a Voicemail link on the left sidebar of our site. Are you making a comic? Send it to us and we'll do a Critiquing Comics episode about it. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. Next week, another edition of Critiquing Comics. Jason and I discuss Paul Pate's Detective Perez, Autotropolis, a detective story that's funny in the way the Fast and Furious films are funny. And Adam joins me to review Simon Roy's new one-shot from Image, Grizz Grobus, about a robot advocate for eating your veggies on a planet where humans have settled just in the past few hundred years. 2 interesting books to discuss next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.